how to trust yourself and how to stand in your truth, even in the face of disapproval, how to listen to that deep inner voice when your mind is telling you it's impossible or it's irrational, doesn't make sense. That's the topic of today's Soul Sovereignty and Sexuality podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, International Soul Embodiment Guide and Relationship Coach. And this level of deep inner trust is the path to sovereignty. It is the only way, in fact, to be sovereign. Because in order to live according to your inner truth, your divine truth, you have to trust what is arising. You have to trust what your soul voice is asking of you, is telling you. You have to trust that even when it does not meet external expectations, when it is the opposite of what you've been told, when you perhaps disappoint others or face disagreement from them, and especially when no one else is giving you approval. And I am having this conversation, in part, having recently embarked on my own travel adventure, so to speak. I'm traveling around the East Coast, teaching sacred body wisdom workshops at wonderful yoga studios that are really aligned with this. The most recent of which was in Danville, Virginia, where I am now, actually, at Sweat and Soul Yoga. So be sure to follow them on Instagram or Facebook if you don't already. Great, great, great yoga studio. And I could look at most of what I've done since I was a criminal prosecutor and an attorney for 7 years and then left the legal profession. And ever since then, I have made really radical choices to align with my soul's truth that a lot of people would think were just crazy. And so I have this conversation from this deep inner knowing of how much inner work it takes to trust the inner voice, to trust the inner desire, to walk and pave a very different path than the one most people are living. And if you're listening to this, I imagine it's because you desire to be sovereign. If you're listening to this, it's because I imagine that you desire to reclaim your power from external sources and return it to you. And I also imagine that if you're listening to this, that you want to trust something you know and feel deep inside, but maybe you don't know how, or maybe you're so engulfed by self-doubt. Because self-doubt is one of what I call the core wounds of humanity. For millennia, we have been conditioned to doubt ourselves, particularly as women, though I see men struggle with this as well, maybe not to the same extent or in the same way. Think of the story of Adam and Eve. And in the story, Eve had this desire to know herself. She had this inner desire for wisdom, and she trusted it, and she took the forbidden apple. And her eyes were open, and she saw what she had not seen before. And we're told for that she was evil. We're told that she was the cause of the downfall of humanity because she trusted herself, because she chose for herself, because she desired to know herself. So this has been deeply embedded in the individual and collective psyche, again, particularly for women. And it is this core wound, which we all have to face in order to be free, in order to claim your own God, goddess state, in order to claim your own throne. To be sovereign is to sit on one's own throne. I would say the throne of your own divinity, which is to be your own authority. You cannot be your own authority if you are not trusting you. It's impossible. Because the reason we don't trust ourselves is because we are taught to trust others more than ourselves. You're trusting the fear more than your own knowing. You're trusting the doubt more than your inner desire. And the question ultimately becomes, I'm going to say a lot of other things in this conversation. The question ultimately comes, what do you choose to trust more? Because you're trusting something. You're either trusting the other person or you. You're either trusting your doubts or your fear or your own truth. What are you trusting more? I've had many scenarios in which I had to ask myself this question. And it ultimately came to the point in which I was so willing to trust myself, but I didn't even care if I was wrong anymore. This was several years ago, and I realized that I still remember the moment. I would rather trust myself and be wrong than not trust myself and be right. Because that trust in yourself creates deep inner union. And inner union is what I'm all about. It is that inner union that creates sovereignty. It is that inner union that creates the inner divine union, which allows you to experience divine union with another in partnership. It's actually what allows you to experience divine union with God, Goddess, source, creator, whatever you call it. And this requires that you get really real, really, really real with yourself. Radical honesty is essential. Now, I'm going to assume that you were already connected to your inner body wisdom, that you were already connected and aware of how to differentiate between your ego voice and your soul voice. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular podcast episode. I spent other episodes where I've touched on these subjects, and maybe I'll do one specifically on the ego versus soul. But get really clear on that. That's a huge part of what I offer in the Sacred Body Wisdom Workshop. And there's also an online series, the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series, both available at thepathtosovereignty.com. And if you are wanting to connect more to your body wisdom and your inner truth in order to really trust that, then I highly recommend going to the in-person workshop on the East Coast if there's one near you, or doing the online series, which during the month of June is $50 off. So it's only $147, which that makes it like less than $20 per practice, plus the teachings and bonuses and all of that. So I highly recommend that. Assuming you do know how to distinguish between soul voice and ego voice, because this is where the doubt can often come in. So if you're not used to this, then the doubt will tell you that you're making it up. And the doubt is coming from the ego versus really trusting and knowing that no one can take away from you. So one quick way to look at this is that the soul voice rises up into your awareness. It doesn't come down from your head. Big difference. And when you have a soul knowing, your inner voice, your soul voice, it can often be softer and more quiet than the voice of the mind, the voice of the ego, the voice of other people. Particularly when you are more accustomed to looking out into the world and seeing what you think you're supposed to do, or what you think you're supposed to like, or how you're supposed to feel, or what other people want of you. If your energy is outward, a lot of people's energy is outward. That's why in Sacred Body Wisdom, it's about pulling energy back into you, shining your core out versus taking the world in and making it yours. You are shining out. And if you're not already accustomed to doing that, then the voice of other people is going to be a lot stronger. Whether it be an inherited belief, whether it be what you've seen your family do, what you're told to do, all of that. Okay, what you see on the TV, what you see in movies, what you see in the radio, or hear rather. You have to turn your eyes inward and see your inner world, see your inner self. That's how you start to connect with your truth. It's not your truth if it comes from outside of you, unless you do the inner work to connect and align to how you are meant to live your life. Now, perhaps you feel a deep soul knowing, and that soul knowing is asking you to end a relationship, or that soul knowing is asking you to leave a career, like I left being a prosecutor to going on a spiritual pilgrimage. Or perhaps that soul voice is asking you to speak a deep truth to somebody else. Then get really, really clear on exactly what is coming up for you. Get really, really clear. One, what is the soul knowing that I have? What is the deep truth that lives within me that is ready to be expressed? Get clear. And then, what is stopping me? So radically honest with yourself. What is stopping me? What beliefs? What thoughts? What fears? What is my head telling me? See it, write it down, put it on paper, look at it. Because you have to detach yourself from these thoughts. You have to detach yourself from these beliefs. You have to detach yourself from these feelings in order to become the observer. And as you become the observer, you recognize they are not me and I am not them. And therefore, I get to choose consciously how to align to my soul's truth and not be beholden to these external truths, quote, truth. And that process can take time to really start to differentiate between the external and internal. But that process is so fruitful. And as you become aware of, say, your inner experience more deeply through connecting with your body and going within, then it's a matter of self-validating your own knowing and your own feeling, your own experience. Self-validating is, I know that you disagree and you don't see it the way I do, and that's okay. I don't need you to see it for me to see it. I don't need you to know it for me to know it. I don't need you to agree for me to follow my own truth. In a relationship situation, for example, the person might not understand. I thought things are great, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But for months, I've been suffering inside because XYZ. Yeah, but I know deep down, I'm not happy. Yeah, but, right? Whatever that truth is, your truth, not what they want to hear, not what they want from you. You have to give yourself permission to do what you feel called to do and not look for external permission. We look for external permission when we look for others to say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. You should do that. Oh, yeah, I love that. That's great for you. Versus, I know I myself have faced people saying, you know, when I left the legal profession to go on a spiritual pilgrimage or many other things that I've taken massive leaps for in my life. That's irresponsible, or you shouldn't be doing that. It's not a good idea. It's not the safest thing. You should be more safe. You should be blah, 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 blah. But I know this for me, and I don't actually need your permission to live according to my soul truth. Huge key of sovereignty. Don't actually need your permission. I don't need your understanding. I don't need your agreement. Don't need your validation. And this requires that you create deep levels of internal safety. Now, internal safety is that you can face the external disapproval and judgment, maybe even condemnation, lack of permission, disagreement, without taking it in and making it yours. I was just talking about this on Saturday at a Sacred Body Wisdom workshop in Danville, Virginia, at Sweat and Soul Yoga. Really super, super great yoga studio. If you're anywhere in Virginia, be sure to follow them. And it's really about developing a strong core in which you're not letting the energies of others into you, partly because your energy is radiating out, and partly because you decide for you who you are, no one else. You decide for you who you are. So this creation of internal safety by anchoring into your true self, your soul self, your divine self, your own knowing, is going to ground you more deeply into your body. And it's also going to allow your light to radiate outwards, which keeps the energies of others outside of you because there's no space for them to come in. And you are not letting them decide if you were right or wrong or good or bad, worthy or unworthy. You are deciding that for you. And so when they don't agree or give you, quote, permission to do what you know is a deep soul truth, it's okay. Not in a defensive way, not in an angry way, but in a, that's okay. Because I don't need you to get it. I don't need to convince you because I don't need your permission. And so even being really honest with yourself about where you're wanting to convince, where you're wanting permission, where you're wanting other people to think you're good. This is a huge one. This came up recently with somebody last week as well, because again, particularly as women, particularly powerful women, free women, intelligent women, were demonized until they were evil simply because they wouldn't submit and they wouldn't allow themselves to be controlled. Think of Lilith, the legendary first wife of Adam. She left because she said, hey, I want to be on top at least half the time because I know I am equally worthy to you. And Adam said, no. And she said, well, then I'm leaving because I know my divine worth and I'm not going to accept a state of submission. And so she did. She did. She left. She flew away. And then she was demonized because she dared to choose for herself. And that was evil. Just like Eve was considered evil because she chose for herself. Well, guess what stops you from choosing for yourself? Not trusting yourself. And so to trust yourself is a radical, revolutionary act. But it does require creating this deep inner safety, which is a huge piece of the work I do with my clients one-on-one, is creating internal safety. I have spent 15 years creating deep levels of internal safety, deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that level of internal safety can only be created by anchoring into your divinity, your own God, goddess state, your soul embodied in form. And when you start to connect with this, you start to connect with your inner truth, you start to connect with your soul. You become invincible, not because you are physically invincible, because we are physical beings just as much as we are divine beings, because you know who you are. And you find safety in a world beyond this physical world. Because you know your consciousness travels with you. You know your soul travels with you. And it is, for me, more important to be true to my soul than anything else. Because if I don't have that, what do I have? Right? If you don't have that, what do you have? Nothing outside of you will ever fill that void. If you are not sacred union with you, you cannot be in divine sacred union with a partner. If you are not in sacred union with you, you will never be free. You will never be your own authority. You will never be sovereign. And so I highly encourage you to not only be honest with yourself about what are your fears, what are your thoughts, what are your beliefs, what are your feelings. And if you want support with this, I do offer Divine Activation Portal if you're like, I don't know where to begin. Either the Divine Activation Portal or the Sacred Body Foundational Series, unless you're near an in-person workshop. Both are going to be really good ways to anchor more deeply into your soul truth and get clear on what's been stopping you from that. Because there are journal prompts and wisdom teachings in addition to the activation. So that's a resource if you're feeling overwhelmed by this and you want support. And the final piece that I'll leave you with around trusting yourself and standing in your truth without needing approval is that when you can self-validate, right? When you can give yourself permission, give yourself approval, even when others can't, because you decide who you are, right? The first few things we talked about. You start to notice the difference between questioning yourself and doubting yourself. Questioning yourself is always good. It's always good to question what is coming up for me and be really curious. Question your behavior if other people bring it to light. But to doubt yourself is to make yourself wrong. And often doubting yourself creates this, it's like an energetic discordancy in your system where you are actually separating from pieces of yourself and pushing them down as unwelcome. Let me see if I can make this more tangible. If there's a deep truth that you're aware of inside and you haven't been able to act on it, it's often because there's a part of you that you're not welcoming into your heart. Welcoming that part of you that isn't what other people want or that you don't even want, but welcoming her in love, opening your heart into acceptance, opening your heart into acknowledgement, and then anchoring into the power that you have, the I can, I can. versus the conditioned disempowerment of I can't, I'm not allowed, I'm not supposed to, I shouldn't. What will they think? What will they do? The focus has been on the external, maybe hurting another, maybe disappointing another, maybe how it's going to affect them. In order to trust yourself, you have to bring your energy and your power and your awareness back into you and how you're affected just as much as how other people are affected. It doesn't mean that you deny other people and how they're affected. It doesn't mean that you don't open your heart to them and their experience. It means that you place yourself equal to the other and you matter just as much. And you're not willing to sacrifice your truth so that they don't have to feel what you think that you don't want them to feel or what they don't want. It is ultimately about knowing your own divine worthiness. It is ultimately about placing yourself equal to others. It is ultimately about knowing that all of you is welcome and all of you belongs here and none of it makes you bad. As long as you're doing it from a place of love and awareness of self and other and honoring your deep soul truth. I hope this is helpful on your path. You have a journal nearby and you could write some of these down. If not, listen again, take some notes, write down these journal prompts, go deep with them. And if you want to access the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series or look to see if there's a workshop happening near you, go to thepathtosovereignty.com. I'll put the links in the show notes. You can also, that includes actually access when you do a divine activation portal to the Sacred Body Wisdom Foundational Series. And let's see, another big piece of this I'll mention is that around trusting yourself. Trusting yourself is a huge aspect of feminine power. So I'm going to mention the Sacred Feminine Power Retreat upcoming in Greece. It's a huge aspect. I'll probably talk more about this in future episodes. So there's also a couple spaces left for the Sacred Feminine Power Retreat. If you want to join us September 27th or October 8th, all the links below or at thepathtosovereignty.com. And I'll see you next week.